Hello everybody, welcome back to Kerbal Space Program Fundamentals. Today we're going to cover reaching orbit, getting a nice circular orbit, performing some simple orbital operations, and then rendezvousing with another craft. We're not going to handle docking, we're just going to get close to another craft. We're kind of mimicking the Gemini 7 and Gemini 6 rendezvous that took place early in the space race before the Apollo program, just after Mercury, which we kind of imitated in our last video. So, in the last video, which if you haven't seen it, I guess I can put some kind of a link into here, we talked about just sort of launching, just getting some sort of material up to the edge of space, just kind of touching space. Now we want to go to space. We want to stay up there for a little while. We want to be able to maneuver around. So what we're going to need is a proper orbiter. So I'm going to name this Orbiter 1. It's like I've demonstrated in the past. I'm very creative. To keep things simple, we're going to keep up with this little command pod Mark 1. It's going to carry one Kerbal into orbit. We're going to need a parachute for it, like we always do. Oh, where'd it go? There it is. We've just gotten the update, the new asteroid update, so there are a few new parts, moving things around a little bit, but don't think that'll be too much of a problem. We'll go over here to structural. We're going to get a decoupler. And there we go, we've got our re-entry craft. It's going to come back home to us. We're going to need some fuel for this little guy, but we're moving around in orbit. We don't need a lot of fuel. So we're just going to use this little tiny fuel tank here, FL-T200. It's not the smallest fuel tank. We've got smaller ones, but you unlock this one fairly early, and it should give us enough for what we want to do. So when we're in orbit, we don't have to worry about drag. We don't have to worry about fighting against Kerbin's gravity as we go upwards. We're just in orbit. We basically have a speed. That speed is determining, or velocity, that velocity is determining how our orbit is going to look. So if we're going a little faster, we're going to swing further away from the planet. If we slow down, we're going to get closer to the planet, which does some weird things with rendezvous, which we'll cover later. So all we're needing to do is change that speed. So this is when we start getting into like delta V. So if you've been hanging out on the forums, you've been reading about everyone talking about, oh, delta V this, delta V that. Like, what the hell is delta V? That is your ability to change your velocity. So if I'm going 100 meters per second in a particular direction and I want to change that direction a little bit, I've got to expend some delta V. Now, when we're calculating delta V, which I'm not going to get into because this isn't about learning advanced rocket science, this is about shooting off little rockets and having a good time. The things we need to worry about are how long can this rocket burn? So like how much time do we have to expend thrust? How hard are we pushing? So what is our thrust to weight ratio? How much thrust do we have in that time that we're burning? And then how much does our craft weigh? So by keeping the weight very low, we can expand the amount of delta V we have. And we've got this very small, light, efficient little engine, the LV909 liquid fuel engine. Slap that on the bottom, and that's basically our entire orbiter. We're going to give it a couple of little accessories to make it function correctly out there in space, but this is basically it. The little pod has a reaction wheel inside of it, so we can use that to get this guy pointed in the direction that we want to perform a burn in. We've got an engine that's going to provide us thrust, and we've got a place to store fuel. We don't need that much fuel, so we're not going to bring that much with us. That way we don't push around a lot of extra weight, thus decreasing the amount of delta V we might actually have. So this is a good little basic rocket. That is a vast oversimplification of how delta V works, and I'm sure if anybody who's like really into this stuff is watching this video, they're pulling their hair out going, you're not explaining that correctly. But you know what, man? This video isn't for you, alright? You already know. Jeez, I wish somebody would explain it simple to me when I first started. Alright, so that's our little orbiter, but it's missing a very important component. Now, spinning this little guy around while he's in orbit so we can make these adjustments and perform different burns in different directions is going to expend electricity. And this engine does not provide any electricity. That's one of the things that makes it small and efficient. It's not got any kind of an alternator in it that's drawing electricity off of it. So we're going to need an alternate way to get electricity. So we'll go over to our utility tab here, and we're going to pick the dead simplest little OXSTAT photovoltaic panel. So just a little solar panel. I'm going to put our symmetry mode to 4. And I like to have this set to angle snap. It just keeps things tidy. Grab our photovoltaic panel. You see we're moving 4 of them around there. And I'll just line them up like this. If you had to, you know, put them on the diagonal, that's cool too. I like mine like this. So we've got 4 little photovoltaic panels. So as the sun hits that, it'll charge them up. Now the only problem we'll run into here is, what if we perform a lot of maneuvers while we're not out in the sun? We're on the dark side of Kerbin, the night side of Kerbin. So to solve that problem, I'm going to switch this to 2. And I'm going to grab this little battery here, Z100 rechargeable battery pack. And I'm just going to put a couple of those, like right here on the sides. Mostly just because I think it looks neat. You can place these wherever. I just like to sort of line things up and make it like a nice looking little spacecraft. And there's an orbiter. We've got a place to store some extra electricity, so we're not performing maneuvers on the day side. We're charging these batteries up, and then we start using that electricity on the night side, so a more versatile craft. Very small, very lightweight, plenty of fuel, plenty of delta V. So that's our little orbiter. So this is our payload. Everything we put underneath this is sort of a sacrificial structure that just gets this guy into orbit. So like when you see those big rockets NASA's launching, you know, like most of that stuff doesn't make it into space. It just falls in the ocean, or in Russia's case, I guess it's splattered all over the countryside. They've got a lot of empty space out there, sort of to the east of like Baikonur. So we're gonna drop all the stuff that comes underneath it. We're gonna go ahead and get another little stack decoupler. Throw that on the bottom. You can see our order of operations building out here at the bottom right. And then I'm going to grab a couple of these long fuel tanks, the T800s. I'm going to throw 2 under here. You can unlock these fairly early in career mode. Obviously, if you're in Sandbox, you've just got them. And then I'm going to grab, I don't need symmetry mode right now, I'm going to grab a LVT-45. Now we talked about the difference between the 45 and the 30. The 45 has the thrust vector nozzle, which is going to give us more control. So slap that guy on the bottom there. Then I'm going to go to 4 times symmetry. Back to my structural tab. And I'm going to grab this 38K radial decoupler. I'm just going to throw that on here at the bottom. Now, attached to that, some more of these long tanks. Right about there. It's a little low. I'm going to grab the decoupler, kind of drag those upwards a little bit. You know what? I put that on crooked, so I'm just going to grab it and straighten it up. Straighten it up. There we go. Much nicer. Much nicer. It's a very forgiving system here in KSP. Mess something up, just grab it, put it back, put it the way you want it. And now I'm going to get 4 of these T30s. Strap those on the bottom. So these are going to give me more bang for my buck, and I don't really need to steer at the beginning. So these 4 rockets will fire first. They're just going to push me straight upwards. And then this rocket in the center will fire when... Stay on there. This rocket in the center will fire once these 4 are expended. So you can see we're firing these 4 rockets first. We're going to detach them, and then we're going to fire that rocket in the center. This is something I like to do. I've got this decoupling stage here, and then I've got this rocket firing. Well, I'll hit space, and then I'll hit space again to fire the rocket. Or I could just grab the rocket, drag it down there, and now when I hit space, it'll detach the rockets and fire this one all at once. And I don't know, I think it's a little more efficient. It looks cool. I'm going to do the same thing with this rocket motor right here. Boop. There we go. And that's basically it. This little guy should get us into orbit. Should allow us to get our little payload we talked about earlier in a circular orbit around the planet, and then start having some fun up there. So we're going to save this rocket. We didn't mess with crew selection last time, so we'll just check out the crew tab here. This shows you which Kerbals you're going to actually take on your little mission here. You can go to the astronaut complex, you can recruit other Kerbals. We're not going to bother with that. We've just got our big 3, Jeb, Bill, and Bob. That's enough for us right now. And Jeb's already gotten to have his mission. We're gonna pull him out. We're gonna put Bill in there. He's really stupid. And this first mission, he's going to have to go up and just wait. He's going to just be in orbit like the Gemini 7 mission was, waiting for the next launch to come up and rendezvous with him. So we don't need the brightest guy in the bunch for that. He's just going to sit in a tin can and wait for another tin can to come up and wave at him. Bob's very smart. He's going to be handling all the really complex orbital operations to rendezvous those two craft, so we'll save him. And we'll give Jeb the day off. So we've swapped our crew, we've built our rocket. We're going to take it to the launch pad. Loading, loading, loading. Should probably edit the loading screens out, huh? Nah. And there's a rocket out on the launch pad. It's nighttime. Isn't that nice? Pretty stars. Let's go look at them. I crank my throttle up again. Activate my SAS. And then fire the rocket. You can see just those 4 outer rockets burning. When we start building more advanced craft, we'll start looking at things like fuel lines, where we could be running the fuel from these external tanks towards this tank here in the center, so that we can run this rocket without using any of this fuel. It's a really nice, efficient way to lift extra fuel and get a larger sort of delta V budget out of the same rocket just by adding some fuel lines. Not something that we do in actual space exploration as far as anything I've ever seen. I've never seen any onion or asparagus staging. 2 terms you've probably also heard if you've been messing around the forums trying to get the hang of this game. I think it's just a little too complex, and also if you're pumping fuel, you're moving mass around. And that really does have a huge effect on how a spacecraft handles. Alright, there we go. So now I'm at 10. I start to tip over. We're almost out of fuel on these boosters. So I'm going to turn very gently. They're gone. Boom! Fire that next stage. Finish tipping over to that 45-degree angle that we like so much. See, our electricity is much more electricity available to us this time, since we're not just carrying that one little, 50-watt charge or whatever it is. We've got 2 extra things that are each carrying 100, so those batteries are coming in handy there. And we're burning through our fuel. Let's go take a look at the map. Pull our navigation ball up. And we are heading towards orbit. So we're just going to keep an eye on this. We're going to keep an eye on the fuel we've got left in this stage. This stage should get us up into orbit and allow us to begin circularization. We might even be able to finish the circularization, but I'm going to drop it so it ends up in the ocean. Now we're above 30,000, so we're in this next thinner layer of the atmosphere. And this is definitely not required, but I like to go a little more aggressive. I start to bend over a bit farther and a bit closer to the horizon line here on the navigation ball to stretch this orbit. So rather than just go up, 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 and then do like a 45-degree turn whenever I get to my orbital altitude that I'm interested in, I like to stretch my orbit as I'm gaining my altitude. So as you can see, we've switched from surface to orbit now, so this is keeping track of our direction relative to our orbit around the planet rather than the planet's surface. And we are gaining altitude. I'm going for 100, so 100 kilometers above the planet right now. We're approaching that very quickly. Boom! We've made 100. I'm going to give us a little more gas, just since we're still going through the atmosphere here, which is going to, you can see it slowly ticking down just a little bit. That'll definitely keep us above 100 when we hit that apoapsis. So we're going through the last little flaky vestiges of the atmosphere here, punching up into the inky blackness of space. All those stars, we got that galactic sort of band going around. We can see the moon. Coming for you, moon. We'll be there soon. Watch out, I'm going to walk all over your face. And here we are. We're in space. We're above 70 kilometers. We've got this nice, easy arc. And you see, we still have quite a bit of fuel. So, we're going to drift up until... And some people use a maneuver node here. I don't find it necessary, but I started playing before the maneuver nodes were around. If you are more comfortable once you learn how to use maneuver nodes, making one to help you get your orbit in a very efficient manner, go for it. That's great. I'm not going to use one right here because I think circularizing an orbit is a fairly simple procedure, and I think you can do it without those maneuver nodes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to point my nav ball just a little below the horizon here. Because as I'm coasting up, that should drift, and eventually my prograde marker, the little circle with the 3 tabs, should start to align with this dot, my direction, right around that horizon line as I approach my apoapsis. I'm just going to fast forward time a little bit. I don't want to miss it, so I'm not going to go very fast. Just creeping up on it. Okay, we've got T minus 2 seconds. I'm hitting the throttle. And I'm just going to try to keep that T minus section there, like at T plus or T1. That means we'd be just behind our apoapsis. That's kind of where I like to keep it. If I get below it, I go up further into the blue. If it becomes like T10 or something, I'll go down here into the sort of orange. This means we're pointing towards the planet. This means we're pointing away, or from whatever we happen to be orbiting. We've almost got orbit here. Okay, so we got a periapsis. That's a good thing, all right? And we'll get to that in just a second. Now, I don't want to carry this thing into my orbit with me. Whoop. So I dump it. I've activated my smaller rocket motor, performed the last little bit of my burn, and I got to take this periapsis up to about 100. So there it goes, 40, 50, 60, tick, 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 tick. Oh, there you go. I've burned pointing too far upwards. My apoapsis has gotten away from me. I'm just going to let it catch up. Fast forward a little bit. If you're not interested in the most circular orbit ever, like, you don't have to be this careful. I'm just a little particular. I like things the way I like things. And I'm just going to creep up on it again. Boop, there we go. 100, 100. We've got a nice circular orbit. You can see that it's 100, 604, 100, 320. Doesn't really matter. In fact, circularization is unless you're using a mod where you're building a satellite network, or you're wanting to perform another burn from here and you want to be able to accurately predict how much delta V you're going to need from any point in that orbit, circularization is not incredibly important. If I'm just needing to get a spacecraft up into the into orbit so I can perform some science, and I've got an orbit that's 70 by 130, I'm still performing science. No big deal. In fact, an odd orbit like that could be really useful to you. So if you have an orbit that has a periapsis, that's the lowest point in the orbit, that's something like 80. Let's say you're 80 kilometers up. And then the apoapsis, the part furthest away in your orbit, is something like 300. You could bring 2 of each of the pieces of science equipment that you currently have unlocked and perform one in space near Kerbin and then high above Kerbin. So those would be 2 different sort of space biomes that you'd be able to take advantage of by having a non-circular orbit. But that's a different video. So we're in orbit. We've got our little orbiter up here. And you can see we did some work there. We circularized that orbit, and our fuel is practically untouched. You can see just that tiny little divot has been taken out of the top there. That's really great. You know, this craft is efficient. It's not going to cause us to have to make incredibly long burns or to have to expend mountains and mountains of fuel to get a little bit of work done. It's light, it's efficient, it's great. This is a really good little craft for us to put Bill up here and let him hang out in orbit. Let's get a sunrise. Beautiful. All right. Should have sent a poet, right? Okay. Here we are in orbit. I faced us north just so the craft is sort of standing vertical, and we're going to have our buddy Bill here do an EVA, our first EVA. He's going to get out of the spacecraft, he's going to float around a little bit. So we'll hit the EVA button. There he is, he's popped out. If we hit the space bar, he'll let go. We can hit the R key to activate our little jetpack, and then just move him around WASD, kind of the way you'd imagine. And then if we want to go up, shift. If we want to go down, control, same as your throttle controls. Pretty simple. Try not to apply too much power to him. He can definitely get away from you. And you're talking about space here. He's not going to slow down unless you apply some force. He's also got a fuel tank. So if you perform too many maneuvers, you might run out of gas. And then you've just got this little guy floating around, waiting to die in the cold, inky blackness of space. Alright. That was macabre. Let's just get back to our spacecraft here. We just get him close. And we'll get a little message, grab, hit F, he grabs, hit F again, he's back in the spacecraft. We've also got the IVA option, which puts us inside the spacecraft. And this will give you an idea of what like the Mercury astronauts were putting up with. They're living in a little tin can, flying around for hours. You've got all your instruments. You've got this window, which you can double click if you want to get a little closer, but you can't really navigate by this unless you're doing some very complex sort of navigation where you're looking at a star, or let's see if I can rotate this. You know, okay, I see the planet, so I can see this lake. I know I need to perform my burn now. That's sort of old-fashioned style space travel there. I'm going to hit the C key and pull myself out of that view. And there's our little guy floating around in space. Now, this is very similar to the Gemini 7 mission. We're going to leave him in orbit. He is studying the effects of long-term exposure to weightlessness and the cosmic rays on a Kerbal. And we're going to go back to the Space Center. So he just stays up there. We're able to run multiple missions at a time. You can use this to build space stations, build multi-part spacecraft that are going to have, you know, I'm sending up a fuel tank, I'm sending up some thrusters, I'm sending up a crew compartment, I'm sending up a lander. You can build sort of a big mothership in orbit that you couldn't possibly launch from the launch pad. But he's still up there, he's waiting on us, or if he's ever going to get to do anything exciting like Rendezvous. So we need to go ahead and go back to our launch pad. We've already built the rocket we want. So we can just click on the launch pad, click on Orbiter 1, and then we're going to take Jeb out again, and we're going to put Bob in. We need our smart guy here. We're going to put Bob in this one. And then we can just say launch from right here. We've already got the rocket we need. We don't need to go to the vehicle assembly building. We don't need to design it. We already know what we want. Just select it from the launch pad, and it's going to appear here any second now. It's black screen disappears. See, I told you. I knew you believed me. One thing, though, we want to change the name of this spacecraft. We want 2 Orbiter 1s, right? So we'll right-click and go to Rename Vessel. Gives us this little option. We're just going to say Orbiter 2. Now we can keep track of them on the map. All right. Max throttle out. Launch it. You guys know the drill? You just saw this, right? It's not interesting. The Gemini missions, however, were very interesting. So originally, Gemini 6 was going to rendezvous with a spacecraft called the Agena Target Vehicle. So this was an unmanned craft, like just sort of a satellite that was going to go up there. Gemini 6 was going to fly up to it and dock with it. That's the whole purpose of the Agena. It had what we call station-keeping capabilities. So it had some small thrusters on board that was able to keep it in the correct orbit, so we would know where it was. We could predict where it was going to be and catch up with it. And then we would be able to send up a spacecraft and dock with it. That was going to be Gemini 6. However, there was a failure with the launch vehicle for the Agena Target Vehicle, so now there's nothing to dock with. So Gemini 6 doesn't really have a purpose anymore. However, Gemini 7 was already on the books. You know, we already knew what we wanted to do with Gemini 7, and that was a long-term mission. We wanted to put these guys into orbit, keep them there for a while, because, again, this is all in preparation for Apollo. This is all just getting ready for the moon mission, similar to what we're doing here. So, in preparing for this Apollo mission, we're going to need to keep some guys in orbit for a while and see if we can, you know, survive. Can we thrive up there? Can we eat? Can we, are our bones going to come apart? Will our eyes just change shape over time? Because part of like the shape of your eye is gravity, pushing it into part of your socket, and all these concerns about like what's going to happen to our guts in space. So that was Gemini 7's mission. So they decided to combine it. Said, okay, well, we'll launch Gemini 7. They're going to be up there for like 2 weeks. They spent over 13 days in orbit in a little tin can, not too dissimilar from what Bob's currently riding in, but with 2 guys in it. So you can imagine 13 days without a proper change of laundry in a little tin can. That's kind of the worst camping trip ever. So these guys are up there orbiting, and then they're going to take the Gemini 6 mission and launch it afterwards so they can go up and rendezvous. But that's not the kind of thing you just do. You don't just like launch another rocket right away. Back then, we're talking about launches that basically destroy the launch pad. So they've got to launch 7, get out there, put out the fires, rebuild the launch pad, get ready to go, get Gemini 6A, they renamed it, onto the pad and get it ready to go out and perform that rendezvous. There we go. We've reached an apoapsis around 100. Let this guy get higher up into orbit. So these dudes are just sitting up there performing scientific experiments. They're doing, probably got a few games of poker in there, I'm sure, while you're just sort of orbiting around the planet, doing laps, until eventually 6A is launched. They get to watch the launch from orbit, which I'm sure looked amazing, just sitting there looking down on Cape Canaveral from orbit and seeing that plume of smoke. They also saw the launch of a Polaris missile from a submarine off the coast of Florida while they were up in orbit. So a lot of fun stuff to look at, but geez, you're up there for 13 days in a little tin can. I would hope there'd be something to look at. So eventually you get Gemini 6A into orbit. They rendezvous. They get close enough to be seen with the naked eye. And we end up with these really great NASA videos of these astronauts waving at each other. Just waving out of their tiny little capsule windows, trying to, get that little bit of human contact with another person that they haven't been trapped inside of a small tin can with for 13 and a half days. If you watch the documentary, the When We Left Earth, the NASA missions, they have interviews with these astronauts. I believe it was Jim Lovell was the one they interviewed in that particular episode where they talk about Gemini. He talks about really wishing he could trade places with the guys in Gemini 6 and get to go home a little early. Alright, so we've got 2 spacecraft in orbit. Boy, they are nowhere near each other, though, right? Now, how are they going to get close enough to wave at each other in their little windows and prove that we can rendezvous 2 craft so that we can perform this Apollo mission? How are they going to possibly do that? Well, orbital operations. Here in Orbiter 2, we've got Bob Kerman. Bob's brilliant. Bob's going to figure this out for us. Now, along this orbit, we have a little ball appearing. Clicking on that will give you Add Maneuver button, which gives you these little symbols kind of appearing here. It's a little intimidating, but don't be afraid. They're actually really, really simple. They point in the direction that your spacecraft would point if you were to burn in that direction. The ones you might be familiar with are prograde and retrograde. That's, hey, speed up, slow down. This is the direction you're traveling. This is the opposite of that. And you'll see a similar trend there. This is one. This is the opposite of it. This will burn you towards the planet or star or whatever it is you happen to be orbiting. This will burn you away. This will burn you sort of, if you're equatorial, northward, and this will go southward. And if you've got sort of a inclined orbit, these don't change. They're not going to point to the poles all the time. If you have an inclined orbit, well, they're going to point perpendicular from that orbit. So it's a perpendicular kind of thrust. They've all got names. I usually forget them. I think it's prograde, retrograde, what is it? Radial, anti-radial, might have those backwards, and then normal and anti-normal. So, simple. With these, we can start just sort of pulling on them. And we're not doing crazy rocket science and working out delta V ourselves. We're just tugging on little symbols like, I want to burn prograde. Now, if I burned 214 meters per second of delta V, which would take 10 seconds, at this point, my orbit would look like this. Gives me a nice little prediction. It says, hey, that would be 466 kilometers from Kerbin would be your apoapsis. I can right-click on that, click on this little X, and get rid of it because I don't need that particular orbital operation up there. Not doing that move. We want to get to Orbiter 1. So we're going to need some guidelines. How far away are we from it right now? What is going to be our closest encounter with it? And are our orbital operations getting us closer or farther away from our goal of rendezvous? So the way we're going to do that is by clicking on Orbiter 1 and selecting it as a target. So now we get all these other fun little doodads and colorful images all over the place. First thing we're going to look at are these little yellow, I hope they're yellow. Boy, I am so colorblind. I think they're yellow though. Nodes, the ascending node and the descending node. These are telling us how far off these orbits are in their inclination as to whether or not they sort of line up. If we were to, if we look at them on flat plane like that. They're not quite the same. They're very close, though. We're going to make them the same just to take one less sort of wild card element out of this rendezvous. So the first one coming up we're going to go over to is this descending node. So we're descending by 0.5 degree. So I'll select this point right there where the descending node is. I'll add a maneuver node. And since this is descending, I want to go up, right? So ascending, descending. If we're going to be dipping away, I want to counter that by burning sort of northwards here. So I'm just going to pull on it a little bit because we shouldn't need very much force to fix a 0.5 degree. You see, I'm barely pulling on it. I've applied 2.2 meters a second, which doesn't even give us an estimated burn time. Like by the time the engine heats up, we'll have already done that. I'm just kind of keep pulling on it a little bit, We're going to see that node start to drift. See, it's gone from half to, so it's gone from 0.5 to 0.2. Oh no. What the heck? Ugh, let me fix that. Sometimes the maneuver nodes act up a little bit, or maybe it's just me. Oh, pulling on it. We're at a 0.3 now. 0.2. Pull on it. Oh, now you see how they start to drift? That's saying that the point where these two orbits are closest has moved. I want to get them to be kind of at these edges here, as far away from this point that I'm currently at as possible. That usually gets me my best results. So I'm just going to tug a little bit, and we get, let's see, NaN. That's not a number, so that's 0. You can also get it to just say 0, but that's a pretty precise little alignment there. So we've already got our maneuver node in place. We know we're expending 18.8 meters per second of delta V, and we're going to be doing that in 5 minutes 31 seconds. Now, over here on our nav ball, we've got some new little things to look at. This symbol is pointing directly away from the target that we're trying to rendezvous with. So if we go to the opposite side, we get this symbol pointing directly at it. If we didn't know anything about rocketry, we might just point straight at the thing we want to go to and fire our engines. But if we go away from the map, we'll see that's the planet. We'll just crash into the planet if we try to do that. So we're not going to do that. The other thing we'll see if we go to the north, which, what is this way? Yeah. We've got this guy. This is a very important little symbol. That is your maneuver node. This is telling you which direction you need to burn to accomplish the maneuver node you have calculated. So we don't have to make maneuver nodes that only point in one direction. We don't have to always point like straight at the 180 or straight at the 90 or something like that. We can combine tugging on those different symbols to get a much more complex maneuver planned ahead of time. And this little maneuver node is going to point us straight in the direction we need to be. So I'm going to try to line up on that as closely as I can. If you're using a mod like MechJab or something that gives you a little bit of an autopilot, a lot of times those will have a function that allows you to just directly lock onto a maneuver node. So if you're not super confident in your flying abilities, and you're just kind of getting the hang of the whole KSP thing, you might consider using something like that. You can still plan your maneuvers using the maneuver node, and then have a tool like that help you accomplish it. Just sort of training wheels. It's totally fine. It's how I got my first moon landing, was using MechJab. Now I don't use it at all. I actually enjoy the flying, but it is a nice learning tool to see how it's done. So okay, we need to get over here. We're going to fast forward time a little bit, but not too fast because we don't want to miss our maneuver node. So it's in 3 minutes. Speed up time a little bit. 2, 1. Okay, start slowing down. Don't want to miss that maneuver node. So don't have an estimated burn time. I'm just going to do it like within 10 seconds. That ought to be fine. Okay, and I throttle up. You see that begins to drop very quickly, so I don't give it even full throttle. And I'm just going to burn until that's below like 1 meter a second. You can try to get it down to 0, but then you might do that. You might give it a little too much gas, and then you'll have to flip around, find your maneuver node again, give it a little more. That's just wasting fuel. So we just try to get close. You click on the little checkbox here, gets rid of that maneuver node. And now, if we look at our little inclination nodes, they say 0.0, so we have a very similar inclination. So we're narrowing this down. We're getting closer and closer to this guy. Okay, now we have roughly the same altitude. I'm at 107, he's at 100. So the path I'm following is a little longer, and at a higher altitude, I actually go a little slower. You see, maintaining orbit requires less speed the farther you are away from the body you're orbiting. So I'm going a little slower. He's going to constantly move a little bit faster. But if I sit in this orbit and wait for rendezvous, we will be here for years. We don't want to do that. So I'm going to take advantage of him already moving a little faster than me, and I'm going to raise my orbit farther out and see if I can get him to catch up with me even quicker. So let's go ahead and drop a maneuver node. The way we're going to raise our altitude is by a prograde maneuver. So I grab my little prograde marker and I just yank on it. You see all kinds of things are moving now. My apoapsis marker is moving, telling me this is our farthest point. And these other little markers we see here, these are telling me my closest intersection with my target. They're going to start moving around. Right now we don't need to worry about those because we're really far apart. You see what, here to here, that's our closest encounter. That's really far. So I'm just going to push it way out there. Just way out there. Let's see what we get. That's, yeah, 5. Let's go with even 500, see if we can work that out. I like even. Oh, it's too far. 492. 501. Close enough. Okay. Now we just spin around a little bit until we find that marker. There it is. There's our maneuver node. Get right onto it. We can see we have 11-second burn ahead of us, and it's going to happen in 23 seconds. So we're just going to wait until the node says about 11. We could do it a little early, we could do it a little late. This part isn't vital that we get it, oh, just perfect. And then we just hammer down that throttle and burn. You can see that delta V dipping away as we expend fuel. Getting low, starting to drift. Gonna just move that to get a little more on par there, and below 1 meter a second. Kill it. There we go, 500. Look at that, awesome. You can see hardly any fuel expended. Very efficient little craft, very efficient little guy. And now we'll fast forward time as we rise up to this new higher orbit. There's Bill sitting in his same 100-kilometer orbit, just zooming around, playing Go Fish by himself. At these higher orbits, we can do a faster time warp, so we're moving at times 100 now. Wait till we get right about to the apoapsis, and I gotta turn my spacecraft so we're facing that prograde marker. And we're going to do just like when we were getting orbit initially, and we had to raise that periapsis to make it even. We're just going to do that again. We're going to raise this periapsis again. I'm not even going to raise it that high, because I don't need a circular orbit right now. I just need to be higher up than Bill is in Orbiter 1, so that he can catch up with me. So, just going to move forward a little bit. Boom. And begin to burn. Yeah, 200. That's fine. So I got a 500 by 200. I'm going to be going much slower than he is in Orbiter 1. And I can time warp at times 100. So we can make this move along quite quickly. You can see he's already catching me up very quickly. In fact, we might be able to get a rendezvous since he's coming up on me so fast here. So in order to get a rendezvous, we want to have both of these craft in the same place at the same time, right? That's what a rendezvous is. Makes sense. And then we have to get them moving in the same direction at the same speed. So what comes in really handy for that, right down here where we've had orbit and surface speeds in the past, we can click on it again and get target. So target will give us prograde and retrograde markers. There's like a retrograde marker that are relative to the spacecraft we have targeted. So if I'm approaching a space station and I've got this target speed, and my target speed is like 150 meters a second, that means relative to that space station I'm going 150 meters a second. So when I get to it, I'm just going to fly right past it. So I need to get onto this prograde marker as I approach and begin applying thrust to slow myself down so that the two of us appear to not be moving relative to each other. That's a thing to remember. In space, everything is moving. Everything is moving at tremendous speeds in orbit or, leaving a body or something like that. But if they're moving at the same speed, then they appear to be standing still. So that's kind of the idea when you see those astronauts floating around inside of the space station, the International Space Station. They are moving at the same speed as the space station. They're just hauling ass up there in orbit. But it appears as if they are standing still. They are floating serenely in space. So we're going to use that whenever we get close to our target in order to slow down or speed up, whatever, however you want to look at it, to match its speed. Now, it's coming up. It's going to move around here. I'm going this way a bit slower. So I'm going to go out here in my future orbit, and I'm going to start experimenting. What happens if I slow down and pass into its orbit? Will I get close? Will I be far away? Here it shows me 219 kilometers away. Now that's a lot closer than we had it before, right? They used to be on the opposite sides of the planet. We've gotten it a lot closer. We're going to start moving this around, see if it gets closer or if it gets farther away. Might have to adjust. Oh, see that? 83 kilometers. Very close. Move it over here. Oh no, grab the wrong thing. Let's grab this, move it over here. Ugh, maneuver notes need a little work. Okay, let's slow down from over here and see what we get. Okay, that's a little further away. That's up to 120, so maybe the sweet spot is kind of in the middle here. Let's try right there. Oh boy, that's close, right? 16 kilometers. We can almost just see him at that distance. Let's try moving it around, see if we can get a little closer. And this is just experimentation. You can see we've got 6 minutes before we hit this maneuver node, so it's not the end of the world if we're spending a little time trying to perfect this. Just make another little adjustment. Alright, 1 kilometer. That's as close as I want to come, really, in this kind of a maneuver. I don't want to accidentally run into the guy. Oh, look at that, we're already on the maneuver node. So we'll just line right up on it. We've got a 10-second burn ahead of us, 5 minutes in the future, and we've got plenty of fuel to make that burn. So there we are, positioned, ready to strike. So we'll fast forward our 5 minutes. 4, 3, 2, 1. Slow time back down. Get a little closer to that 10 because I'm impatient. And burn. See, we're getting closer and closer. Alright, I'm just going to move to match my little marker that's drifted a bit. Give it that last little bit of delta V, just to make it similar to what... Hello, wife, I'm recording. My wife's here. She says hi, everybody. Okay. Now our actual intersect that we've managed to work out is 1.9 kilometers. That's super close. That's within 2 kilometers. At 2 kilometers is when you start simulating the physics of the other craft, so that's very, very close in this game. Unfortunately, it's on the night side, so it's going to be a little dark out there, but we've got a solution for that as well. So for now, we're just going to get it on target mode, and then we're going to move to this retrograde marker so we can keep an eye on which way it goes, because we're going to need to burn retrograde here pretty soon. And we've got 895 difference in speed. It'll be a bit closer when we're there, I believe. So we just drift on in, getting closer and closer to our target. You can see how wonderfully they just line up when you use those maneuver nodes. We've just ticked down to 50 time warp because we're no longer above 120 meters or kilometers. We're on that retrograde marker, and let's go to the map. We've got 79 meters per second to kill. There's our target. Killing that speed. We're just going to get it as close to 0 as we can get it. Don't have to be super perfect here. Okay, so there we are. He's right over there. He's so close. Now that he's a bit closer, we can start using these markers that were telling us like which direction he was in. So I'm going to point straight at him and give it a little burn. You see that prograde marker comes in. I can move kind of to the opposite side there and influence that a little more. I want to try to get that marker right on that dot, which means I'm going straight at this guy. And since he's so close, I can make maneuvers that sort of make sense in like regular old Newtonian physics land and not have too much trouble. And you can see that gives us a new encounter over here that's at 1.8. Let's try to get it a little closer. Still 1.8. Let's burn straight at it. 1.7. Getting there. Boom, boom, boom. Ticking down, ticking down. Look at that. 0.3 kilometer. That's great. So let's watch him get closer. When he gets to about 0.3 or 300 meters, we'll start to prepare to slow down. Okay, he's getting close. Turn around to that retrograde marker. That's probably about as close as he'll get, so we're going to burn just, a little bit of throttle. We're not performing a big maneuver here. We're just changing speed a little bit. Just a little bit. There we go, 0. So he should stay right about where he is. Let's go back to this marker. Perform another little burn. It's going to bring us closer and closer to him. And that's a collision course. We got a 0.0, so let's get over here and get ready to brake so we don't smash right into him, right? Here he comes, here he comes. Oh, I can almost see the spacecraft. Time warping a little bit just to get him here a bit quicker. And there we go. He's right there. He's so darn close. Let's fly to him. Oh boy, let's not wreck into him though. Just gonna go real slow. Just getting as close as we can without bumping into him. And that is probably close enough. So I'm going to try to get this right down to 0. Later on, when you start building spacecraft using RCS, it might be a little easier to get those last few meters to get just as close as you possibly can, because it's a much more gentle push, or if you're using a smaller engine than even this one. At this distance, we're a little dangerous just using something even this size. So let's go over and say hi. We can't, there's no button to make them wave out the window. So I'm going to EVA. We're going to jump off the spacecraft, activate our jetpack, fly down to Orbiter 1. Let's go tell Bill hi. So he's probably lonely. Oh, look, we came up behind him. He doesn't even know we're here. Let's scare him. Let's scare him, huh? Hey, Bill. Think you're all alone in space, don't you? We'll just grab a hold. That looks good. Now we're going to use some bracket keys to switch between different spacecraft. So now we're operating Orbiter 1. And we're going to get the internal view from Bill. Oh my god. That's Rendezvous. That's so easy, right? You can totally do this. It's not that difficult. It may take you a while. My first Rendezvous took me most of a day to get the hang of. But once you get it, my next one took me maybe an hour. My one after that took maybe a half an hour. And now I plan my launches around Rendezvous and when the target craft is going to be nearby, all that kind of stuff. So you'll get the hang of it. You can see from our elapsed mission timer here, he's been in orbit for like an hour, or 2 hours. So he's got it much easier than the Gemini 7 guys. I'm sure Bill's very happy for that, to not have to be in orbit for that long. Now we're going to deorbit. This is actually probably the most important procedure during your orbit is getting back down. How do you come home? You've got your retrograde marker, slows you down. It's going to bring your periapsis down into the planet's atmosphere, which is going to slow you down, right? Makes a lot of sense. So we're going to make sure there's nothing in front of us. There's our buddy up there. He's far enough away. We shouldn't run into him. And we're just going to turn on that rocket engine. And that dips our periapsis down. What, 22? That's plenty deep in the atmosphere. And then we can just fast forward time until we hit the atmosphere. Here it comes. Once we get to 70. All right, we can no longer time warp, but we can do physics time warp at time 4. Also, at this point, we don't need the rest of this spacecraft. We can cast that off. Just boom, throw it loose. And then fast forward time. We're just going to come on down in the atmosphere. It's going to hit us like a ton of bricks. It's going to slow us down. We'll see G-forces increasing over here. If you're using a mod like Deadly Reentry, you would see heat rising, and those G-forces might possibly kill your Kerbal. You don't have to come in spinning like this, but boy, it looks fun, right? Check Bill out down there at the bottom corner if you can see that in the video with any kind of clarity. He does seem to really be enjoying himself. Just a spinning and a spinning. We've got a very shallow approach here, so if this were an actual spacecraft, we wouldn't have enough speed to sort of ricochet off the atmosphere back into orbit, into a higher orbit, so we wouldn't have to worry about getting trapped in space, but at the same time, we wouldn't have too much heat or too much G-forces that would end up killing our astronaut. All right, let's try to get his bottom of his spacecraft, where his like imaginary heat shield is, directly sort of into the wind to protect him. And we should be seeing some pyrotechnics any minute now. Traveling almost 2 kilometers a second as we enter the lower atmosphere. There's the fire. Boy, watch when we go to the moon. We go to the moon, we come back with so much speed, we hit the atmosphere, it is a massive light show. But here we've got a nice gentle approach. Coming down, got some rocky terrain here, some hills, but shouldn't be a problem for this robust little spacecraft. And wait till we get just below 200 meters a second. That's when I like to fire my parachutes. And he's home. We'll go back up and help Bill down, or help Bob down as well. But that's really it. You guys don't even see that. This is mission accomplished here. So if you followed along, then you should be orbiting, rendezvousing, being able to return craft, design a nice orbiter that's functional, it's able to get work done in orbit. You're really on your way to having a nice functional space program at this point. The fundamentals that we're covering in this will lead to things like docking and orbital transfers to other bodies, sort of injection stage towards the moon. So very important stuff. You're going to want to practice this. You're going to want to be able to reliably get into orbit. You don't want to spend a lot of time designing your perfect moon lander and then just see it crash into the ocean near the Kerbal Space Center because you haven't quite got orbit yet. So orbit's very important. That's really all there is to it, though. It takes practice, especially rendezvous, but orbital operations are very simple once you get your head wrapped around the basic rocket science. You know, if you really want to get into it, I think Buzz Aldrin wrote the book on it, so you could go read that. So there he is. He's back on the planet. Plant a flag. Boop. Shink. Flag out. And yeah, good luck. Have fun.